What you're about to hear is not just the story of a missing child. It's the story of a storm that tore through Texas and took with it more than anyone could imagine. In July 2025, amid the worst floods the hill country had ever seen, 8-year-old Cile Steward vanished from Camp Mystic. No one saw her leave. No one saw where she went. Her name became a whisper carried by the river, a mystery born in chaos, in darkness, and in the roar of rising water. This is the little girl who vanished from Camp Mystic. It began like every summer night at Camp Mystic, a quiet, all-girls retreat nestled among the pine trees and winding rivers of Kerr County, Texas. The girls had spent the evening singing songs by the campfire, roasting marshmallows, and laughing under the sky as fireworks from nearby towns lit up the horizon. Among them was Cile Steward, an 8-year-old from San Antonio, shy, curious, with a soft voice and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something beyond what others could see. That night, she'd been one of the last to leave the riverbank, carefully collecting stones to take home to her mom. When counselors called everyone back to their cabins, the sky had already started to change. Dark clouds rolled in faster than anyone expected. The air grew heavy, electric. By 11:02 p.m., the first thunder shook the hills. By midnight, the rain began. At first, it was just rain, the kind Texas kids are used to. But within 20 minutes, it became something else entirely. The Guadalupe River, which bordered the camp, began to swell at a terrifying pace. The ground, already soaked from weeks of storms, couldn't absorb another drop. Water began pouring downhill toward the camp's lower cabins, fast, cold, and unstoppable. Counselors ran door to door, shouting for the girls to wake up and move to higher ground. Flashlights cut through sheets of rain as thunder roared. Cile's cabin was one of the closest to the river. She shared it with 6 other girls, all between 8 and 10 years old. When they opened the door, they saw the first wave of floodwater racing through the camp like a black serpent. According to survivors, Cile was holding her flashlight when the power went out. One girl remembered hearing her yell something, maybe a name, maybe a warning, before the storm swallowed her voice. Moments later, chaos, screams, children running in every direction, wood cracking as cabins began to collapse under the current. Some made it to the chapel, perched on a hill above the camp. Others clung to trees, praying the water wouldn't rise higher. When rescuers arrived at dawn, they found overturned canoes, torn ropes, and debris from what once was Camp Mystic. The flood had reshaped everything. Of the 132 campers and staff, dozens were injured, and Cile Steward was missing. The morning after the storm, the once peaceful valley that held Camp Mystic looked like a war zone. Cabins had been flattened, trees ripped from the ground, and canoes lay tangled in branches 20 feet above the ground, a sign of how high the water had risen overnight. And among the scattered chaos, one name echoed through every radio call and rescue command. We're still looking for a girl, Cile Steward, 8 years old, last seen near Cabin 4. As soon as the sun rose, emergency crews arrived from across Texas. Helicopters hovered above the camp, searching for movement. Boats navigated through the brown, swirling floodwaters that had once been walking trails. Parents arrived before dawn, many still in pajamas, their cars parked along the county road outside the barricades. When the names of the rescued children were read aloud, one name was missing. Cile's mother collapsed in the mud, whispering, "She's just hiding. She hates thunder. She's hiding." Search teams fanned out in every direction. They followed broken fences, driftwood, and debris fields that stretched for miles. Each rescuer carried a laminated photo of Cile, her small face smiling in a pink swimsuit, her brown hair pulled back in a braid. By the second day, the National Guard joined the operation. Over 400 volunteers scoured the woods, riverbanks, and ravines. Dogs picked up faint scents, but they always led back to the river. The current had been violent, twisting, and unpredictable. Entire sections of shoreline had been swept away. Divers went into the cold, murky water, where the river widened near a fallen bridge. They searched until nightfall. Nothing. Then, on the third day, rescuers found a small flashlight tangled in debris nearly 2 miles downstream. It was still faintly working, blinking through mud and branches. Her initials, CS, were scratched into the handle. For a moment, hope returned. But as the hours passed, hope turned to silence. By July 6th, Cile's disappearance had become national news. News trucks surrounded the camp entrance, reporters broadcasting live from the scene of devastation. "Where is Cile Steward?" became the question on every headline. The flood had taken dozens of lives across the state, but this case was different. Cile's face, young, innocent, missing, embodied the heartbreak of the disaster. At night, volunteers lit candles by the riverbank. The light from hundreds of small flames reflected on the still black water. A local pastor spoke softly into the humid air. "If she's out there, Lord, lead her home." By the end of the week, the search radius expanded over 20 miles. Crews found toys, clothes, and camp supplies scattered for miles, reminders of lives uprooted. But not one confirmed trace of Cile. Her mother refused to leave the site. She sat on a folding chair near what remained of cabin 4, clutching her daughter's bracelet, blue and white beads spelling out Cile. "If she's alive," she said, "she's waiting for me to come find her." And even as hope faded, no one could bear to tell her otherwise. By the second week after the floods, the once frantic rescue operation for Cile Steward had shifted into something quieter, colder. The water had receded, the debris was cleared, and reporters had begun to leave. But one question refused to die. How could an 8-year-old girl disappear without a single trace? At first, the assumption was simple. Cile had been swept away by the river. The currents were deadly, and several victims had already been found downstream in the following days. But when divers and sonar teams finished scanning the Guadalupe River basin, they found nothing. No body, no clothing, no personal items beyond that flashlight. Experts began to question the timeline. Had she really been near the river when it flooded? Could she have wandered into the woods before the storm hit? Or was something else, something human, involved? Among survivors and staff, rumors began to swirl. Some of the counselors quietly told investigators that strange things had been happening at the camp before the flood. Unfamiliar vehicles parked near the entrance, footprints spotted beyond the fence line. A flashlight beam seen in the trees late at night, when all campers were supposed to be asleep. In the chaos of the storm, no one could confirm anything. But one counselor swore she saw a green pickup truck near the old service road around midnight, moments before the power went out. At first, police dismissed it, but the more they looked, the stranger it seemed. Within days, investigators located a vehicle matching that description, submerged near a creek several miles away. It had been carried there by floodwaters. Inside, there was nothing. No ID, no owner record, no license plates. Just a torn map of the Camp Mystic area and a child's shoe floating near the back seat. When shown the photo, Cile's mother went pale. "That's her shoe," she whispered. "I bought that pair last month." For the first time, the case shifted from accidental drowning to possible abduction during the storm. News spread fast. Half of the community refused to believe anyone could have taken advantage of a disaster to kidnap a child. The other half thought the evidence was too specific to ignore. Journalists descended on Kerr County again, now framing the story as the vanishing amid the storm. Talk shows debated whether Cile had been swept away or snatched in the confusion. Meanwhile, police quietly worked on a new theory. Someone could have used the chaos of the floods to cover their tracks, taking Cile far from the camp before anyone realized she was gone. By late July, investigators had interviewed every counselor, every camper, every parent. No one had seen Cile after 11:30 p.m. that night, and no one could explain the missing van. The storm had erased the evidence, but not the truth. Somewhere beneath the wreckage of Camp Mystic, the story of what happened to Cile Steward was waiting to be found. For weeks, investigators combed the floodplain, following fragments of clues left behind by the storm. But none carried the same weight or fear as the abandoned green van. Half buried in the mud near Limestone Creek, it was discovered by a local rancher surveying his property days after the floodwaters receded. At first glance, it looked like another piece of storm wreckage, twisted metal, branches and debris. But when deputies opened the driver's door, they froze. Inside, the floor was covered in silt, leaves and a child's sock. The van had no license plates. Its VIN number had been scratched off. Investigators worked slowly, photographing every inch. In the glove compartment, they found a folded tourist brochure for Camp Mystic, the kind given to parents during registration. It was soaked but legible. On the back, written in faint blue ink, were the words, "Check 4A by the river." Cabin 4A had been Cile's cabin. Beneath the passenger seat, forensic technicians discovered several small hair strands tangled in mud and grass. They were sent to the state crime lab for testing. Then came the most haunting find, a stuffed toy wedged between the seats, a small faded teddy bear missing an eye. When shown to the family, Cile's older sister identified it immediately. "That's Buttons," she whispered. "She never slept without him." The area where the van was found was dense, covered in pine, cedar and oak trees. Floodwaters had cut new paths through the terrain, but rangers noticed tracks leading away from the vehicle. Two distinct sets of footprints. One was large, likely a man's boot, the other smaller, barefoot. The prints led deep into the woods before vanishing into the soft earth near the creek. Forensic teams searched every inch. They found pieces of rope, a broken flashlight, and a child's hair tie tangled in a branch, but no sign of a body. It was as if the forest had swallowed them both. As investigators expanded their search radius, they learned that a former camp maintenance worker, a man named Wade Harlan, had gone missing shortly after the flood. He had worked briefly at Camp Mystic the previous summer and had a criminal record that included trespassing and unlawful restraint. Neighbors in nearby Kerrville reported seeing him just days before the storm, driving a green van. The evidence began to align. The missing worker, the van by the creek, the note mentioning cabin 4A. But Wade Harlan was gone. No one had seen him since the night of the flood. A search turns dark. With the storm's devastation and lack of communication, tracking him was nearly impossible. Roads were destroyed, bridges collapsed, and the entire region was covered in wreckage. Still, state troopers scoured every back road and abandoned house within 50 miles. In a press conference, Sheriff Alan Peters said, "We believe this man may have used the disaster as cover to take advantage of the confusion. We will find him." But as the days passed, hope dimmed again. There were no sightings, no leads, no trace of Wade or of Cile Steward. And for the people of Kerr County, the woods around Camp Mystic began to take on a new chilling name, the Forest of the Vanished. The discovery of the green van turned the Camp Mystic disappearance from a natural disaster into a criminal investigation. For weeks, the Texas Rangers and FBI worked side by side, building a timeline around the man whose name had begun to dominate every headline. Wade Harlan, 42 years old, former maintenance worker, and now the prime suspect in the disappearance of Cile Steward. Wade was no stranger to law enforcement. Records revealed a history of minor offenses across 3 states: trespassing, breaking and entering, indecent exposure. He was intelligent but unstable, often described by acquaintances as quiet, polite and unpredictable. He worked seasonal jobs, drifting between construction sites, church retreats, and for a short period, Camp Mystic. Investigators discovered he had been fired from the camp the previous summer after staff accused him of watching the girls swim from a distance. No charges were filed, just a quiet dismissal. When detectives traced his last known address, they found the trailer abandoned. Inside were flood maps, camping gear, and several news clippings about the July 2025 floods. Pinned to the wall above his bed was a photo torn from a Camp Mystic newsletter. Cile was in it, smiling, sitting cross-legged with her cabin group. By early August, a multi-agency task force was in full motion. Helicopters circled the wooded valleys between Kerrville and Bandera, while officers on horseback and K9 teams combed the trails. Locals were told to lock doors, check barns, and report any sign of movement. Rumors spread like wildfire. Sightings of a bearded man at a gas station, a campsite with a child's clothing, a voice heard crying in the woods. Each lead led nowhere. The forest was too vast, the flood damage too severe. Then a break came. A hunter in Mason County, nearly 60 miles north, reported finding a makeshift campsite. Inside a half-collapsed tent, rangers discovered canned food, cigarette butts, and a worn Bible. On one page, circled in pen, was a verse from Matthew 10:26. "For there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed." Forensic tests confirmed the fingerprints on the can matched Wade Harlan, but there was something else. A strand of long brown hair stuck to a tree near the fire pit. DNA results were pending, but investigators already feared the truth. Within 48 hours, the area was surrounded. Helicopters flew overhead. SWAT units crept through the trees at dawn. But by the time they reached the campsite, Wade was gone. Only a fresh trail of footprints remained, leading deeper into the forest, toward a steep ravine where the sound of rushing water drowned out everything else. Searchers followed it for 2 miles until it disappeared at the edge of the cliff. No body was found, no sign of Cile. The manhunt had reached its breaking point. As weeks passed without progress, fear spread across Texas. Parents pulled their children from summer programs. Camp Mystic closed permanently, and the name Wade Harlan became synonymous with the storm, a shadow carried by wind and water, unseen but always near. The search for him, and for Cile Steward, was far from over. But what investigators would uncover next would change everything. By early September 2025, it had been 2 long months since Cile Steward vanished from Camp Mystic. The floods had passed, the rivers calmed, but the fear in Kerr County still ran deep. Every sound in the woods, every rustle, every shadow made hearts race. Then, one humid afternoon, a search team working 20 miles north of the camp stumbled upon something strange. Hidden deep within a narrow ravine, half collapsed under vines and moss, stood a cabin, old, silent, and invisible from the main road. The cabin looked abandoned, a relic swallowed by the forest. But as the deputies approached, a faint smell of smoke drifted through the air. Someone had been there recently. When they pushed open the warped wooden door, they found the interior dark and cluttered, the kind of place where time itself seemed trapped. There were cans stacked in corners, damp clothes hung to dry, and a single lantern still warm to the touch. And then they saw it, carved into the wall above the doorway in rough block letters. No trace, no goodbye. The same words that had appeared on online message boards days earlier, posted by an anonymous user claiming to know the truth about Camp Mystic. Forensics teams spent hours documenting every inch. They found camping equipment, a rusted rifle, and a small sleeping bag that looked recently used. But on a makeshift wooden table lay the most chilling discovery, a row of photographs. 8 in total, all of young girls, smiling, unaware they were being watched. The 5th photo was Cile Steward, taken at what appeared to be Camp Mystic, days before the flood. Her face was circled in red pen. Next to the photos was a torn page from a local newspaper. The headline read, "Search for Missing Girl Enters Second Month." On the margin, someone had scrawled, "She's safe now." Behind the cabin, a narrow trapdoor led to a root cellar. Inside, investigators found remnants of supplies, water bottles, blankets, and a small pink hairbrush. DNA testing later confirmed it belonged to Cile. The cellar was empty when they found it. But the presence of food, bedding, and that hairbrush suggested something far more terrifying. Cile might have been kept there, alive, for days or weeks after the flood. As night fell and floodlights illuminated the cabin, a deputy outside noticed footprints leading away from the back door. Fresh ones, heavy boots, size 11. Search teams spread out immediately, following the trail into the trees. But the forest was vast, and the darkness seemed to swallow their light. By dawn, they realized the footprints led in a circle back toward the river, as if someone had been watching them the whole time. Wade Harlan was alive and still in the woods. In the weeks following the discovery of the cabin, panic spread across central Texas like wildfire. The revelation that Wade Harlan had likely been living within miles of the search zone, even as hundreds of officers combed the woods, shattered any illusion of safety. And soon, the rumors began. On September 18, 2025, a 911 call came in from a rancher near Junction, Texas, about 40 miles west of Camp Mystic. He claimed he'd seen a thin man, barefoot and filthy, walking along a dirt road at dawn, carrying what looked like a child's backpack. Deputies arrived within minutes, but the man was gone. They found only muddy footprints and tire tracks leading toward the hills. When shown photos later, the rancher didn't hesitate. That's him. The eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. Soon, reports came from across the hill country. Hikers, truck drivers, even church volunteers swore they'd seen a shadow moving along the tree line at night. Some said he was scavenging for food. Others claimed he was watching them, standing completely still among the pines. Social media exploded with stories. A Camp Mystic watcher trended for days. Posts described eerie encounters, car alarms going off, dogs barking at empty fields, strange lights flickering deep in the woods. The police publicly dismissed most of it. Privately, they weren't so sure. Then, on September 25th, firefighters responding to a small brush fire near Harper made a chilling discovery. Amid the ashes of a burned-out tent, they found a metal tin box partially melted by the flames. Inside were 3 items. 1. A folded photograph of Cile Steward taken from a news broadcast. 2. A page torn from a child's notebook with the words, "She's mine," scrawled in pencil. 3. A fragment of fabric, pink, embroidered with the name Cile. Forensics confirmed it came from the t-shirt she wore the night of the flood. The discovery reignited the manhunt with new urgency. Every night, helicopters roared overhead, their searchlights sweeping through the canyons. Roadblocks went up along Highway 83, but each time officers thought they were close, the trail vanished, like smoke dissolving into the air. Locals began calling him the ghost of Camp Mystic. Parents refused to let their children sleep near open windows. Campgrounds across the state saw cancellations as far away as Dallas and Austin. Even the rivers seemed haunted, quiet, swollen, still carrying the memory of that night. Then, a new twist. A small package arrived at a local news station in Kerrville. Inside was an old cassette tape and a single note. "You're all looking in the wrong place." And the tape's contents, and what investigators would later hear, would change everything they thought they knew about Cile Steward's disappearance. When the brown package arrived at KRVL News on September 28, 2025, no one thought much of it. It had no return address, only the words, "For the Truth," written in black marker. Inside was an old cassette tape, the kind no one used anymore, and a short note that read, "You're all looking in the wrong place." The newsroom froze. For weeks, the state had been obsessed with the story of Cile Steward, the 8-year-old girl who vanished during the floods that destroyed Camp Mystic. And now, something, or someone, was speaking directly to them. Authorities immediately seized the tape. It was transferred to the Texas Rangers headquarters in Austin, where forensic audio experts worked overnight to extract the sound. When they pressed play, a man's voice echoed through the static. It was calm, almost methodical. "You think she's in the water," the voice said, "but water doesn't take what it loves." A long silence followed. Then, faintly, the sound of wind, or maybe breathing. "I found her after the storm," the voice continued. "She was cold, she was quiet, but she wasn't gone yet." Investigators paused the playback. Even seasoned detectives admitted later that the moment chilled them. The audio team enhanced the background noise and isolated a distant metallic clanging, the rhythmic sound of something swinging on a chain. A local deputy recognized it instantly. "That's from the old water tower at Harper Junction," he said. "The chain on the ladder slaps the metal every time the wind hits." Search teams were dispatched immediately to the overgrown area near the tower. They found remnants of a makeshift campfire, a half-empty propane tank, and a pile of charred clothing. Among the ashes was a small silver cross, melted and warped. It matched the one Cile's mother had given her the night before she left for camp. When word leaked about the tape, news vans swarmed the region. Headlines screamed, "The killer speaks! Ghost or confession? Is the Camp Mystic case solved?" But the truth was far less certain. The FBI confirmed the voice belonged to a man, likely between 40 and 50, but couldn't match it to anyone in their database. The handwriting on the package offered no usable leads. Meanwhile, locals claimed to see lights flickering around the tower at night. Others swore they heard children's laughter carried on the wind. Then came one final revelation. Forensic analysts noticed faint audio buried deep in the tape, a female voice barely audible beneath the static. It whispered a single sentence, "Tell my mum I tried to come home." The room fell silent. Even the most skeptical agents couldn't explain it. Was it a trick of the mind, or the last words of a girl who'd vanished into the storm? The discovery reignited the search once more, but it also raised a terrifying new question. If that voice was truly Cile Steward's, then who had been with her when she spoke? By October 2025, most of Texas wanted to forget the nightmare of Camp Mystic. The floods had receded, leaving behind twisted trees, shattered cabins, and a silence that felt almost sacred. But the river had changed. It was deeper, darker, and locals swore it had a pulse of its own. And just when everyone thought the story of Cile Steward was over, the river gave something back. The discovery. On the morning of October 16th, a fisherman named Luis Romero was casting near the Pedernales River, about 30 miles downstream from the camp. His line snagged on something heavy beneath the current. At first, he thought it was a branch. Then he saw fabric, pink, torn and tangled in reeds. He froze. He'd seen that shirt before. Every news station in Texas had shown it, the one with the embroidered name, Cile. Authorities arrived within the hour. Divers combed the riverbed and soon recovered a plastic evidence bag weighted with stones. Inside were photographs, water-damaged but still visible, pictures of Camp Mystic before the storm. In each image, Cile stood smiling, surrounded by other children. But one detail stopped everyone cold. In the background of several photos, a man's shadow appeared, always at the edge of the frame, always watching. Investigators sent the photos to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit in Quantico. What they discovered tied the case to two other disappearances that had occurred in Arkansas, 2022, and Oklahoma, 2024, both involving missing children, both near flood zones, both campsites wiped away by sudden storms. And in each case, witnesses described a man driving a white pickup truck, older model, with a broken tail light. It was the same detail given by a counselor at Camp Mystic, one that had been buried in early reports. A man seen parked near the cabins the night before the storm hit. The flood had erased the tracks, but not the memory. When divers returned to the site, they made one final discovery. A submerged concrete tunnel, once part of an old irrigation system, now half collapsed by mud. Inside were personal belongings, a torn notebook, a flashlight, a small plastic bracelet, and strands of blonde hair embedded in the sediment. DNA analysis would later confirm what everyone feared. The hair belonged to Cile Steward, but there was something else. On the tunnel wall, scratched into the concrete, was a message barely legible through the silt. The water took her back. Forensics dated it as recent, not from the time of the flood. Someone had been there after, someone who returned. The river whispers again. That night, as police sealed off the site, a storm began to build again over the Texas hill country. Lightning flashed across the valley, and the river swelled once more, churning with the same relentless force that had started it all. And from somewhere deep within the thunder, a voice, faint, almost human, seemed to echo across the floodplain. "Help me get home." The discovery confirmed the unimaginable. Cile Steward was gone, but whoever had taken her, or whatever had followed her into that storm, wasn't finished yet. When the next storm came, it wasn't just rain, it was vengeance. On October 24, 2025, thunder shook the Texas Hill Country once more, pounding the same valleys that had taken Cile Steward 3 months earlier. Locals said it felt like the sky itself was remembering. The floodwaters rose again, submerging the search site near Camp Mystic. Police had pulled back their teams after the DNA confirmation, but one man refused to leave, Deputy Kyle Reynolds, who had been first on the scene the night the girl vanished. He told his captain, "If she's still out there, she deserves more than silence." That night, he parked his truck by the ruins of the cabins and waited, alone, as the storm tore through the valley. The last transmission. At 11:47 p.m., a dispatch received a call from Reynolds. His voice was broken, distorted by static and rain. I see something. There's a light in the water." Seconds later, "It's her! My God, it's—" The radio cut out. No further communication. By dawn, rescue teams found his vehicle half submerged on the riverbank. The driver's door was open, engine still running. The deputy's flashlight lay in the mud, flickering weakly. But Reynolds was gone. All they found were his muddy footprints leading toward the water. And then, a second set beside them, smaller, barefoot. The river gives and takes. That same morning, the flood began to subside as abruptly as it had come. Volunteers returned to assess the damage. In the shallows near the collapsed old bridge, they saw something glimmer beneath the current. It was Deputy Reynolds' badge, wedged between 2 stones. Entangled in the reeds next to it, a child's bracelet identical to the one recovered weeks earlier. But this one was pristine. No rust, no mud, no time. It was as if it had just been placed there. The legend begins. Within days, the news spread. Some said Reynolds had drowned trying to recover the girl's remains. Others whispered that he'd followed her, wherever she had gone. Camp Mystic was officially condemned, fenced off by state authorities. But that didn't stop people from coming. Ghost hunters, journalists, even parents who'd lost children in floods, all drawn by what they called the river's memory. Many claimed that on quiet nights, you could still hear 2 voices by the water, one calling for help, the other answering. The official case remains unsolved, but for those who live near Camp Mystic, the story isn't about missing persons anymore. It's about the storm and how it never forgets. What happened that night on the riverbank? Was it justice, grief, or something the flood itself carried back from the dark? The story of Cile Steward reminds us that tragedy doesn't always end with discovery. Sometimes it lingers in the air, the water, and the hearts of those who can't stop searching. If this story gripped you, help keep her memory alive. Subscribe, share this video, and tell us what you believe really happened at Camp Mystic. Because somewhere in Texas, the river still remembers.